皆様、ただいまから
We will now begin G7 Hiroshima Summit Follow-up event, Symposium on GEAC Report 2023 Towards Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment. As opening remarks, Ms. Ueno Michiko, Special Advisor to the Prime Minister for Women's Empowerment, Consumer Policy, and Elderly Policy, will deliver opening remarks. Due to the diet session, Ms. Ueno was unable to attend, and therefore Mr. Ima Fuku, Deputy Director General from the Foreign Policy Bureau, will read her remarks on her behalf. Please allow me to read on behalf of Ms. Ueno, Special Advisor to the Prime Minister. Esteemed guests, at the opening of the G7 Hiroshima Summit follow-up event, Symposium on GEAC Report, please allow me to deliver opening remarks as Special Advisor to the Minister for Women's Empowerment. This year, as the presidency of G7, Japan has been leading the efforts on gender issues on many fronts. In the leaders' communique of the G7 Hiroshima Summit, Japan committed itself domestically and internationally to defend, advance, and protect gender equality and rights of women and girls of all diversities. The G7 ministerial meetings also discussed gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls of all diversities from various perspectives, as included in the outcome documents. GEAC is an external advisory body launched in 2018 by Canada, the then G7 chair, to make recommendations on gender equality to the G7 leaders. This year, as chair of G7, Prime Minister Kishida convened 14 experts in gender equality from within and beyond G7 in March, and prior to the G7 Hiroshima Summit, a summary of recommendations were presented to the Prime Minister in May, which will be used as a basis for the G7 gender discussions as described. The recommendations of GEAC has been presented to the Prime Minister yesterday by Chair Shirahase, GEAC member Kuroda, and GEAC members visiting Japan, and I was also present during the presentation. As noted in the final report, there are still many challenges to be overcome in order to realize the full, equal, and meaningful participation of women and girls of all diversities in social, political, and economic areas. Japan has been steadily making efforts based on the 5th Basic Plan for Gender Equality, and the Kishida administration has positioned women's economic independence as one of the cores of the new form of capitalism, which is the centerpiece policy of the current administration. And based on the basic policy on gender equality and empowerment of women, we are working to realize a virtuous cycle of women's empowerment and economic growth. Japan will continue to lead economic growth, global efforts to achieve gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls of all diversities, taking into account the advice of GEAC. I am very pleased that the final report will be introduced today by the 8 GEAC members, and I hope that this presentation will provide an opportunity to reflect on the discussions regarding gender in the G7 under the Japanese presidency and to build momentum for further strengthening our efforts in this area. Thank you. Thank you very much. Next, Yoko Kamikawa, Minister for Foreign Affairs, will deliver her remarks via a video message.
ご列席の皆様、G7 広島サミットフォローアップ GEAC 報告書発表シンポジウムにお集まりをいただきありがとうございます。本日は出席がかなわず残念でありますが、一言ご挨拶を申し上げます。私は本年9月に約20年ぶりの女性外務大臣に就任いたしました。日本が本年議長国を務める G7 については、就任当初からその重要性に特に留意し、議長国としての取り組みに力を注いできました。GEACは議論を重ね、こうした G7 の議論の重要な一角をなす、ジェンダー分野における貴重な提言をまとめてくださり、本日、 最終報告書発表に至ったことを喜ばしく思います。本年5月に開催された G7 広島サミットにおいて、日本はジェンダー分野において政治、経済、社会分野にまたがる包括的な対応が必要であるとして、ネクサスアプローチを提案をし、G7 首脳の賛同を得ました。これはさまざまな政策分野にジェンダーの視点を取り入れるジェンダー主流化の取り組みをさらに一歩前進させるものであります。個々の分野ごとにバラバラに施策を講じるのではなく、互いに連携調整して取り組むことにより、相乗効果が発揮され、ひいてはジェンダー平等という共通の大きな目標の達成に向けた進歩の加速化が期待できるという考え方です。そして今般発表される GEAC の最終報告書は、経済的エンパワーメント、教育、平和構築、データという4つの柱の下で、ジェンダー平等の達成のために、いずれも欠くべからざるものとして、さまざまな取り組みを提言していると承知をしております。これらはまさに精度の高いデータに基づき、経済、教育、安全保障等のさまざまな分野にまたがる課題に一体的に取り組む必要性を訴えている点で、G7 の考えとも一致するものです。中でも私が外務大臣就任以前から取り組んできている女性、平和、安全保障、いわゆる WPS が最終報告書において、平和構築の柱における提言の一つに取り上げられ、紛争解決を目的としたすべてのプログラム、政策において、WPS の完全な実施を確保すると明確に記載されたことを歓迎いたします。本日午後には、WPS のサイドイベントも予定しております。こうした行事を通じて、ジェンダー平等及び女性のエンパワーメントを一層推進するための機運が一層高まることを願っております。ありがとうございました。
ありがとうございます。
Thank you very much. From here, GEAC members will present on the final report and recommendations. The four fundamental pillars of the report, economic empowerment, education, peacebuilding, and data, will be introduced by each leader. From here, I will hand over to Professor Shirahase, Chair of the GEAC 2023.
You're saying us, actually. May I, talk in one sitting? Thank you very much. It was our pleasure to have such a great, event to complete our mission. All of our teams very much appreciate a lot of support, encouragement from many people. And first, I'd like to introduce, what we have focused on. As Minister Kamikawa mentioned, that we focus on 4 pillars. They are economic empowerment, education, peace building, and data. So I'd like to invite, 4 leaders of the subgroups today and briefly talk about, this, topic itself, but beyond, beyond what we discussed in our meeting, I'd like to listen what they're thinking of based on what we have done. And next, I'd like to invite all of our members of whom can make it today, actually this time, and what they're thinking of and what they want to talk and promote on this area. And first, I'd like to invite Hedwig Nuance, and she is a chair in the European Women on board. She did a great read And with the head which Caroline is also a member of the subgroups, I'd like to invite Hedwig to talk a little bit about empowerment, economic empowerment. Please.
Thank you so much, Chair. And so this chapter has been written by Caroline Fabergé, who is there, Anda Sabardan, and myself. And the first pillar, indeed, is about economic empowerment. And in this chapter, we evidence the link between economic empowerment of women and gender equality. So economic empowerment brings multiple benefits, not only for the women themselves, but also for families, society, and the economy. For example, financial independence makes women less vulnerable to partner violence. Increasing women's economic power leads to higher school attendance for children and improved health outcome for families. More women participating in the labor market and closing the gender pay gap unleashes significant growth of GDP and leads to a more inclusive and sustainable economy. Companies with more women in leadership perform significantly better on financial metrics and environmental, social, and governance factors. Countries with higher female labor participation are less likely to exhibit internal conflict and international violence. But in practice, we are far from reaching gender equality. One of the root causes is the way capital is deployed in the economy and society. Financial resources determine which priorities are addressed, what solutions reach scale, and when ideas go unexplored. In the report, we point out at several gaps. In many countries, women lack financial independence due to restrictions on property rights, inheritance, and access to banking. Women are hindered to participate fully in the labor force as they face a sticky gender pay gap and double shifts at work and at home. Public budgets do not consistently address the impact on and needs of women. Decision-making in politics, companies, venture capital, and investment firms is held predominantly by men. And so in this chapter, we make 4 recommendations. First, implementing initiatives to support fully participation in the economy. And why is this so important? Because we know that while young women are now significantly higher educated than men, their participation in the labor force is still significantly lower, with 63% compared to 94% for men. How can we do this? By addressing educational disparities and cultural barriers, particularly with respect to digital literacy. It is also crucial to have universal care systems. Without this, we will keep facing double shifts. The second recommendation is to institute gender-based analysis, responsive budgeting, and gender auditing. This is a specialty of Anda, and she will include this later on. Oh, I think perhaps later on? Okay. And we have a third recommendation, and this is all about gender-smart investment in private sector. And we have the pleasure to have our expert at this table, and she will elaborate on this as well. Our fourth recommendation is expanding the participation of women in financial decision-making, both in the private and public sector. Indeed, we need more women in politics, in government, to make sure the needs and priorities of all genders are considered. We need more women in corporate leadership to make sure companies are profitable, sustainable, and stay relevant. The report highlights that change is possible. The European Union, for example, set a goal of 40%, 40, women in non-executive director positions to be reached at the top of each stock-listed company by mid-26, to be realized by the 27 member states. The message is clear. Ensuring women's economic empowerment is a moral and strategic imperative, and it's one of the key pillars to realize gender equality. Thank you.
Thank you very much, which I will invite Anda and Karina later on. And I'd like to move to the second pillar, education. Sarah Sands will present our brief summary, and Reiko Kuroda is also working on this issue. Sarah.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for your chairmanship too on this report. And education is an interesting one because there's some very good news, but also a puzzle. And the good news is that women, girls, are doing pretty well in education. And if you look at the dashboard, the graph that we have, on women in tertiary education. We're very proud of this dashboard, by the way, because it does mean you can measure everything across best practice. And you'll see that the percentage of women who attain tertiary education in most countries is pretty good. Japan, very good. Korea and Canada, excellent. So women are doing really, really well. And then something happens, that they drop out afterwards, or that there's just not the follow through. And what you see is a sort of disappointment. And I met at the reception last night a professor from this university who said that she taught her students, her female students, all doing really, really well at university, get ready to fight, which is, quite an alarming thing to have to warn young women. And so what we thought is that we really have to address this at the education level as well as beyond. My colleagues will talk about and already have done about some of the challenges for women once they're in the workplace. But it's at school, you can actually start to address some of the expectations, and you can start to see where some of the stereotyping might affect the decisions that girls make, or just the image that girls have of themselves, of what society wants of them, of when they're praised and when they're not. And it affects some of the subjects that they take. So it turns out that girls, while highly educated, then aren't necessarily going into the careers that are going to be the most sort of powerful, the most highly paid. So particularly in the digital economy, we're seeing quite a low level of female participation. And of course, the worry of that is that particularly with artificial intelligence coming, whether women are just going to be designed out of the future. So it's the sense that we saw in education that education is still, we think, the basis for a quality education is the basis for all really female empowerment for everyone. And so, but getting what we call transformative education is getting that right, so that girls always have a sense of what they can achieve. So we looked at that as one of our main recommendations. And then we looked at that while girls are doing very well, where there's an actual absence of female education. So we particularly picked out the egregious example of Afghanistan, and it reminds us that progress isn't something you can take for granted. That in Afghanistan, where actually before the Taliban returned, there was quite a high level of participation of girls in education. There were many girls who were teachers, and now we've seen girls sort of barred from secondary education. We've seen very, very few teachers now being trained. So to see So it was really, it was a statement of solidarity, and warning, and a sort of plea that this can happen. And so never take for granted that women will always be granted an education. In Afghanistan, they won't be. And the other example that we picked out was what's happening to women amongst refugees and migration. And so we've seen this year, obviously Ukraine, we've seen it in the Middle East, a great rise in those refugee camps. And of course, what happens to women is that once they stop being educated, it tends to be that other things happen as well, that they're more vulnerable to violence, so that they're not safe anymore, they're not respected anymore, they don't have hope actually, because there's no sense of what can happen, of the potential for them once they leave education. So that was the sort of great warning. And then the final recommendation, which goes back to the first point about getting the education right so that expectations are right. And here we were thinking about boys as well as girls, that what we noticed was that that actually girls were doing better. There was a reduction in how well boys are doing. There was a sort of years being repeated and so on. And what was interesting once we looked at some of the analysis on that is, again, it's sort of expectations. The expectations perhaps of boys thinking that it wasn't cool to be doing schoolwork, and that their notions of what it meant to be masculine affected their work, and to their detriment. So it's a message, I think, across all the areas, but particularly we saw it in education, that if you get things right for girls, it will be right for everyone else. Everyone else. So just it will be better. It will be better for the boys. I don't know how many of you have seen the Barbie movie, but I think that's the lesson at the end, that we can make things much easier for boys as well as for girls. And so the final point too, just going back to girls in crisis, and we saw during COVID how many people dropped out of school and the expectations for women. And we're seeing it now in climate. I was in Dubai last week, as I'm sure others of you here were, and the sense of urgency and emergency that's happening in the climate crisis, affecting schools, affecting the way people behave, and guess what? It tended to be the girls and the women who were the frontline victims of that. So that was something we wanted to pay attention to. So as I say, good news that girls are doing well, but some warning signs that just to watch some of those sort of societal expectations that can do huge damage. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. So maybe Reiko will talk later. And in addition to two important members of GEAC, Stefania Giannini, who is Assistant Director General for Education UNESCO, took the lead on this group as well. Okay, now I'd like to move to the Peacebuilding Working Group. Marlene Vivian will represent what we're talking about, but at the same time, Jacqueline O'Neill, who is Ambassador for Women, Peace and Security, Government of France, and Delphine O, Ambassador and Secretary General of the Generation Equality Forum, Government of France, were working very hard with us. And until September, Dr. Denis Mukwege, gynecologist, human rights activist, and a 2018 Nobel laureate, also could join. Unfortunately, he has to leave, but they are the group of this peace building. Okay, Marilyn, please.
Well, thank you so much, and it is a great personal pleasure for me to be back here in Tokyo. I think no surprise to any of us, the world is at a very dangerous period. And so the whole issue of peace building is probably more important than ever. And our look at peace building in this report is rooted in gender equality, because in those places where the gap between men and women is closer to being closed, and nowhere in the world is it completely closed, those places are much more peaceful and prosperous. More than 2 decades ago, the United Nations Security Council, that is the place in the United Nations that oversees peace and security, adopted a resolution that is well known by a number, 1325. And that Security Council resolution has since been enhanced some 9 times more in terms of increasing what it covers and the critical nature that it represents. And it was really focused on the fact that women experience conflict differently from men, and that they have a critical role to play as full and equal partners in all aspects of conflict resolution and peace building. The 1325 framework, as we call it, is based on 4 pillars. And just so we all are coming from the same place, I want to briefly explain those. The first is prevention, that women have a critical role to play in prevention. They are like an early warning system on the ground, and we should understand and respect and act on where they're coming from. Their role as participants in all issues relating to peace building, especially negotiations at the peace tables or negotiations at the local level in ameliorating conflict, or even disaster risk management commissions. These are critical places for women to be part of the decision-making, and their participation needs to be seen as a priority. We know that this is an evidence-based case, that when women are at the peace table, for example, they bring issues to the discussions that are critical to being addressed, like reconciliation, economic issues, issues having to do with human rights, which might not ordinarily get there, and perhaps it's an explanation why more than half of peace agreements that are adopted fail in the first 5 years. And so this critical role that women play in participation needs to be greatly enhanced. And another pillar has to do with relief and recovery. What happens post-conflict? It is a critical transition time in terms of how the country comes out of conflict and is able to resume normalcy. It's a time when institutions are formed, constitutions are often written, and again, it is a place where you need the perspective of half the population in those places to influence the outcome. And the 4th pillar has to do with protection. The other 3 were really focused on the agency of women. This pillar recognizes one of the most horrible things that happens in conflict, that in 95% of the cases, sexual violence against women is pervasive. We see that today from Ukraine to South Sudan to Myanmar, in fact, to what Hamas did to Israeli women. It is something that needs to be addressed, and it is still a problem because we are far from addressing accountability in terms of the perpetrators and acting on what is used increasingly by combatants as a weapon of war. So briefly, our paper looks at areas that are critical for implementation of 1325 so that we can see the value that it brings to dealing with these conflict situations. First of all, it should not be on the periphery of foreign policy. It is not an add-on, that when our foreign policy apparatus in our foreign ministries is working on any number of issues having to do with conflicts around the world, the perspective of women and the participation of women needs to be a factor that is included. In any of these places that are on the front pages and even the back pages of news around the world. Take Ukraine, for example, what role we play, whether it has to do with assistance of one kind or another. It also needs to consider the role of women in the security sector, for example, what is going to happen to them, what is going on today, in relief and recovery, both as devastation is occurring, relief and recovery is taking place in some instances, but women are often not a part of that. Donor meetings don't include women as often as they should in terms of recovery. So these are some of the kinds of ways that in the day-to-day operations of government, this issue needs to be included. In fact, it means we do our diplomacy differently, we do our development differently, we do our defense work differently. Secondly, national action plans are one of the things that have been adopted by governments and civil society to take this into consideration in terms of operations. And congratulations to Japan. You've just revised your action plan and are in your third plan. But this is an important guidepost for operations. It needs to be resourced. Only some 25% of national action plans around the world are resourced. It needs to be fully implemented. It needs to have a monitoring and evaluation component. Thirdly, the role that women play at the local level is all important. Women's organizations are not just early warning systems. They are doing the hard work of dialoguing, of facilitating negotiations at the local level, often addressing very early on some of the contributing factors to ongoing conflicts. And we need to recognize the frontline role that they play. Fourthly, climate change. You already heard mention of climate change. It is a security issue. Today, because of droughts, because of flooding, increasing numbers of people are losing their livelihoods. They are moving. There is displacement occurring. Competition over limited resources is taking place. That is leading to conflict. And you also have something you know so well here in Japan, the importance of disaster risk reduction, and there's much to be learned from this experience, but also how to deal increasingly with adaptation and mitigation and the role of women in the whole climate area. So natural disasters are something that we need to be focused on as well. And then in terms of sexual violence and conflict, we have to find ways to end the impunity and to bring accountability to what is happening on a pervasive level. Often crimes against humanity are really factored into what's happening to women on the ground. So these are some of the critical areas that we point out in the Peacebuilding section of the recommendations. And I just want to say in conclusion, because we heard from your esteemed foreign minister, Ms. Kamikawa, her remarks on women, peace, and security. She has been a champion here. Your diet now has the second only caucus on women, peace, and security in the world, which is a tribute to her and so many in the diet. And I think the leadership of Japan, both in the G7 and in the Security Council today, as a non-permanent member, are really making steps in the right direction. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Melaine. Thank you. And then I'd like to move on to the data working group. Maxime Huineto will describe what we are discussing about. The data working group consisted of two other members. One is Dr. Jutta Mendinger. She's the president of one of the largest, research institute in Berlin, Berlin Social Science Center. She was, previous chair of 2022 GEAC. she did great leadership to pass on from German team to Japanese team. So I really like to, credit her contribution here. Unfortunately, she cannot make it. And also Marina Terrani. She's a journalist, columnist, commentator from Italy, and we'd like to pass on our great teamwork to the next GEAC team. Okay, Maxime, please, your turn.
Thank you very much. My name, as it says, Maxime Winato. I'm the Regional Director for UN Women for East and Southern Africa, coming straight from Nairobi. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Since we are looking at the last part of the report, which has to do with data, and since we are at the university, maybe a couple of things in terms of understanding data. Gender data particularly, is defined as statistics that reflect the differences and the inequalities between men and women in different areas of work. And it's important to keep that in mind. If it concerns only one gender, it's not gender data. It's just in the comparison between the two that is important to note. The second thing that's also important to clarify is the type of data that we have. We have generally two types of data: the official data and the non-official data. The official data is usually surveys and censuses, and usually it's done by governments because it's official, it reflects the situation of the country. The second, non-officials, are usually also two types of data: the administrative data and the citizen-generated data. This is more available, but it's not as rigorous in terms of the methodology that governments use for official data. But then usually we compose with both official and non-official data, so that the citizen-generated data and the administrative data will complement areas where government data is not available. Of course, we have issues with each one of these type of data, as you will know, and we try to make it as flexible as possible. I will end on this section of understanding by the idea of the centrality of data in everything that you have heard so far. You can't envisage any policy without having data at the center of it, because you can't determine where you are going, how fast you are going, what direction you are taking if you don't have data. Okay? You can try to open a door that is already open, because you are not informed of the nature of the statistics around that door. So that's what we try to avoid, to ensure that we place energy, we place resources where it's necessary. For instance, you can't continue giving fertilizers to men while they are in overuse of fertilizers, while women are underuse of fertilizer. So you distribute fertilizer in agriculture depending on what statistics are saying about the development of agriculture in the particular country. So after that, like preliminary precisions, maybe let's look at the report now, what we are saying, not just to government of Japan, but to G7s in terms of gender statistics. First of all, to make your morning nice, maybe let me share some small data with you. Data systems in the world, all countries confounded, are underfunded by 450 million every year, which is like a huge gap of investment in data. Another example is that if you look at environment, we are talking about climate change, but the environment-related activities are 25% informed by data. So it means that we are still needing 75% of data in the environment sector. We just closed the COP. So information needed to assess how climate is evolving is missing. I can continue, but we don't have time. But in every areas that you look at, you will see that we have huge data missing. How are G7 countries, how are developing countries then making policy if we have so much data gap? Meaning that we don't know where we are, we don't know where we are going, and we don't know how fast we are going. Now, it's also important that to address that issue, the UN and other entities have worked together to develop what we call country profiles in some countries. We have developed, for instance, the cost of GBV, gender-based violence. How much does it cost to a country? Women that are beaten by this and that have a pay gap, etc., how much does it cost to a country? We have that information. Inform government to say that if we fight gender-based violence, we are saving money for the country and we are developing the country, for instance. Now, this report has highlighted some innovative ways of looking at data or gathering data. One of them is national data on the care economy. We know that women spend a lot of time at home taking care of the house and of the baby, etc., etc. Information about that is completely missing. How much time women spend at home more than men? And we know that the development of the country is based on the development of human capital. And human capital is three things. Number one, education. Number two, health. Number three, sanitation. And these three things are developed where? At the house, with the support of women. And the data related to those activities is something that we have developed. Number two, we have also developed calibration of new national aggregates. One of them is that's UN Women and UNDP. One of them is the Women Empowerment Index. I will not give you all of the details so that I motivate you to read the report. The second one is the Global Gender Parity Index. Those two aggregates have been very, very innovative in terms of capturing some aspects that we don't have like in aggregates like GDP and etc. Now, I will end by looking at the recommendations that we put together in these reports. And they are in the number of 4 separate recommendations. The first one is an invitation to G7 countries to fund gender data so that the gap in gathering data will be fixed. Number 2 is access and use of data, because you can generate data, but if you don't monitor how well data is accessed, how well people can access data without being able to use it. So that capacity is important. Number 3 is developing capacity in the country to generate data. Governments usually are very good at generating data, but as we know, the data generated by government is not enough. So we need to develop other citizen administrations to develop. One example is the electricity company, the telephone company. All of these companies generate a lot of information on their customers. How can we use the information generated by administration, whether they are private administration or public administrations? The information that we go when we want to subscribe to a service, they have a form that we fill. If we are 10 million to fill that form, it's a huge amount of data that a private company has that can inform policy in terms of government policy. That we need to also develop that. The fourth and last recommendation is to focus on vulnerable groups. What we have usually is that we have information on rich people. We have information on people who don't need policy because they are already well off. We are recommending to the G7 countries now to focus on gathering information and data on vulnerable people that are more sensible to policy making. That was the last recommendation, and I will take the opportunity in conclusion to say again that data is the first step of any well-informed policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maxime. Now, I'd like to invite all of our members and GEAC members who can make it this time to visit Japan. And the first, Anda, you like to say something on economic empowerment or, anything, but I'd like you to talk first, economic empowerment.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, for the opportunity. I'm Anda Saparden. I'm from Indonesia. Well, I'm going to complement what Edwidge had said and look deeper into the second recommendation. That is to institute gender-based analysis, gender-responsive budgeting, and gender auditing as guiding principles throughout policy development and implementation. Public budgets offer a powerful tool for addressing gender inequality. To ensure an equitable distribution of resources, we need targeted funding of initiatives fostering gender equality. We also recommend increasing direct flexible funding to women's rights and women-led grassroots organizations. Innovative blended funding should be taken into consideration as well. The current situation with challenging climate change and post-pandemic situation, collaborating public budget and investment from private sector could accelerate gender equality initiatives. In the report, we pitch an example from Indonesia. They launched women and children-friendly village programs that have proven to increase female entrepreneurship and reduce violence against women and children. And there we also blend the public and private sector's financing. Key success factors were setting up childcare and involving women in budget planning. That has proven to accelerate gender equality. Thank you. That's from me.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to invite Colleen. Anything you'd like to talk?
Thank you very much. And I would like to focus on the area of private investment because, as we know, the way capital is deployed in the economy and society shapes our economy. And we know also that decision-making in venture capital and investment firms is predominantly done by men. And therefore, our recommendation is to encourage gender-smart investment in the private sector and provide women entrepreneurs with equal access to private funding. Because we know that it is less than 1.3% of the $69.1 trillion in global financial assets under management that are managed by women and people of color. And barely 2% of venture capital goes to women-led startups globally, although companies funded by women deliver twice as much revenue per dollar invested. And therefore, we recommend creating a fund of funds to back multi-stakeholder initiatives to provide anchor investment in women-led funds. We also recommend gender-smart investing strategies to build the market and mobilize private capital. And in this report, we give the example of 2X Global, an industry body for gender finance that includes more than 130 members institutions. The initiative exceeded all investment goals, raising over $27.7 billion. The 2X investment criteria set global standards for gender-smart finance that have been adopted by a wide spectrum of capital providers. Thank you very much.
And next, Reika Ploda, please say something.
Thank you. As Sarah said, that I think we need years' effort to improve, but so quick to demolish it. That is represented in the Afghanistan case. And also, the world is going to more digital society, and I'm really worried about the unconscious bias hidden in the algorithm and the quality of data used for AI and the generative AI. But if I'm allowed to, these four pillars are interacting with each other. So I want to say a little bit about overview, and I want to put it in a more positive way, just like if gender gap is resolved, if women's empowerment is achieved, I think we can get at least 4 good points. So this is the way to encourage the people. First, we may be able to stop the declining of child birth rates. There is a huge discrepancy between men and women in the unpaid care work at home, as Maxim said as well. So that is for child care, house chores, and care for elderly. Subsidies may be appreciated, but unless couples are able to enjoy raising children, the declining birth rates cannot be stopped. So depending on the life stage, work-life balance must be somewhat different. But if one starts a family, one must spend more time at home. Second good point. In order to achieve SDG 17 goals, not only number 5 that is specialized in gender, all 17 goals must be able towards achievement if the gender gap is resolved and if the woman empowerment is achieved. Number 3, when it comes responding to crisis, as it was said, Melanie and others, something like climate change, natural disasters, and also pandemics. Unexpected oversight may occur if women's perspectives, women's leadership are not included. Number 4, again, Hugh and Caroline said, the companies with women in the leadership do well. So why? We cannot afford not to promote gender equality and empowerment of women because it produces at least so many good points. I was just overarching to it in a more positive way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Actually, there are quite an important point has been made throughout our member reports, and I believe you have already had access to the PDF file, right? So I'd like you to read, thoroughly what we like to talk. But it's not quite time to wrap up. But then again, we chose 4 pillars to emphasize how the society, including Japan, which is not quite advanced in this area, work together the common role. Common issues. The common issues globally means we share the same problems, similar mechanisms to form this kind of issues, but different degrees. And why the degrees are different? Maybe the country offers a different way to provide, or the countries assume differently between men and women. But I like to emphasize that the gender is not only simple, a dummy type of categorization. This is multiple. And at the same time, the stakeholders, who has to working for, to involve this kind of various complex social issues are also multiple. So multiple, stakeholders who played a very important role to solve long-lasting, serious problems, including peace issues, are the one of the key in, starting in SDGs advocate. And as you can see, there are the quite complex and different situations, even among the 4 pillars. Say the funding, which we started discussing more seriously since the German group. Funding is really behind the issue to see so-called statistical parity composing of fundraisers or donors. So this can be the one point which we should focusing on how much we should catch up to achieve the gender parity. Of course, the gender parity is only one aspect to achieve gender equality. The same percentage between men and women are identical ideal situation or not. This is a different issue. So the ultimate goal to create new value and a new norm to make the society change. But as Malain emphasized various times, women think differently. Women experience differently. So I think this is a kind of point. I do not think biologically or generically, men and women are different. However, daily lives are structured very differently, or the situation are quite segmented, in these days. That is why we need the voice from different angles and different lands. So in order to achieve the peace globally, never done that before. Actually, this is a huge, huge issue facing all of us. But think differently, focus on the differently, how to allocate the benefit, how to allocate the asset differently. That might be the very necessary things. That's why, including Japanese government, advocate, how important we create and construct a new value to make the change or a new way of, capitalism. This is, very important and critical issues, to deal with. And our, GEAC team is very much, agree on this. On this issue. And I'm going to do it later on. Okay, thanks. So that's, we have already discussed. And today, I really like to invite all of you. What do you think and what do you feel to us? We all are ready. But before opening up the floor, I'd like to introduce one more important key person. Can I? Important person who help us. Loli, actually, my pronunciation is not great, and always her last name. Loli Silverberg. She's a science, advisor. And the major editors in writing up this final report, she helps me a lot. And I will talk about it at the very end of later, how we're working together very hard. This is not a nominal type of team. I really, we did ask all of us, all of them, to work substantially. This is a serious, group working, I have to confess. So I'd like to open up the floor, and if you can, clarify what you'd like to ask, and one by one, maybe we very much appreciate it, and we are all ready to answer questions and comments.
白橋先生、GEAC のメンバーの皆
I would like to thank Professor Shirahase as well as all the members of the GEAC. I'd like to thank all of you for your contribution. As Professor Shirahase has mentioned, we would now like to have question and answers among the GEAC members. But before that, Ambassador Jean-Éric Paquet of the EU delegation, I would like to invite him to share with us some words, please. So Ambassador Paquet, please.
Thank you so much, Professor Shirahase. Thank you very much for this great report, and thanks for the great presentations this morning. Extremely insightful. And I think the GEAC report, the fact that the Council works with G7 presidencies in turn, is so important. I think the process is absolutely essential. The issue of gender equality or gender parity requires a lot of leadership, and the leadership requires to be put under pressure. And I think that's what the GEAC work really should aim at, putting more information available, and with that information also creating the need for action on the side of leadership. I'm saying this because obviously we are not there yet at all. But more than that, gender equality is being eroded brutally, sometimes like in Afghanistan, or more subtly like during the COVID pandemic. So I think complacency is just not possible. It's exactly the opposite. And therefore, the pressure which you create, the very positive pressure which is created by knowledge, by data, by your recommendations, is immensely, immensely helpful. I would like to, and in that context, obviously, I would like to reiterate our gratitude as a European Union delegation to have been able to work with you and many other actors around the G7, including during the Gender G7 with Commissioner Dalli. I just wanted to make two comments. I could make many more, but you were all so compact in your presentations that, of course, I need to be compact now as well. The first one was on education and this amazing formula you used, saying that girls are going to be designed out of our future by AI. I think this is a real challenge, but I think even more terrifying is that our future is being designed without women. And I think that, frankly, is a major, major issue. I'm not entirely sure I can see how that will be corrected short term, because girls are just less into these subject matters. And I know it from experience with my own daughter. There was a long discussion for many years. She's now graduating, but she's not going to go there. So I think we really need to think, and the more work we can put into that, the more outcomes that I hope we can achieve. Maybe we'll need more than just getting girls into that subject. Maybe some regulation might be needed as well in terms of AI and other digital developments. And my second comment was on data. I think there's indeed not much that is more important than data to spur political choices and political action. In the G7, out of the German presidency, there is a framework for reporting on gender and diversity and equality. I very much hope that this can become visible as we move to the Italian G7, because that will certainly have impact on leaders. They don't like to be compared, and that type of data really points at where strong points are, but also weaker points. And I finish, of course, with a question to the panel. What, if you could ask leaders, so prime ministers, governments, leaders of administration, maybe just one thing which they could do to really make a decisive move towards gender equality and parity, what would that be? Thank you.
パケ大使ありがとうございました。それでは
Thank you very much, Ambassador Pake. May I ask for your responses?
It's really important and thankful comments. You'd like to answer a question about education first? About girls' education?
Yes, perhaps your point about what we would ask of leaders. And I think the dashboard that you mentioned, which has been done by the OECD, it took quite a lot of time to work out what the measurements would be and so on. But it does mean that it's there for all to see, and it is a great a mechanism against complacency. So I think, and of course, one wanted to be very diplomatic about it, and you immediately look for whether you've done well or sort of badly. But actually, it's I do think it's a really, really useful mechanism, which we would hope would continue for each presidency. And it does show that inequality isn't necessarily where you would expect it. That there are countries that may think that they are doing very, very well, and then you'll look at one of the areas and really worry. On the point of education, I think on that sense of complacency of our responsibility, actually just to make sure that children are in schools, and that's that we do see, in particularly in crisis. That's what happened. It happened during COVID. It's happens during war, of course, and that once girls are out of school, you really have sort of cancelled hope. So that would be the main ask.
Thank you very much. I think Thank you for mentioning that. I was hoping that somebody would agree with me in the audience, and I think maybe you are more than one. And I like your question about what to say to the leaders. Two things. Number one is courage, because we have seen in catastrophes in the world, we have seen leaders step up the game. During COVID, it was obvious everywhere. Government has taken measures that we have never seen before. And gender inequality is comparable. So what I would suggest is that we show the same leadership. And there's a difference between leadership and followership. Because most politicians will say, oh, the society has not reached that level. You know, we are waiting for society to progress, and then we can make policy in line. No, we are not elected to follow the society. We are elected to lead the society. So as such, we need to show people where we need to go as a society because we are leaders. So courage. Thank you.
Thank you. Hedwig?
There is one very simple suggestion that I can make. There should be no political decision, no committee, no debate, no panel without representation of 50% of the population.
Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna get some core question about what. Only if you choose one important thing, what do you choose?
Well, I think the most important matter and I think it goes to the heart of the question, is that nothing happens without political will. And that's what we're not seeing in many respects on many of these issues. We have an evidence-based case, whether it's education or whether it's peacemaking. The data, while insufficient, is strong. That's where much of this comes from, and yet it is ignored. So act on the data that's there. Demonstrate the kind of leadership that's important to prioritize these issues. Understand that the outcomes are in the self-interest of the leader if he or she really wants to see these kinds of outcomes. And thirdly, validate your personnel. There are good people working at the middle level in all of our governments, but they are not validated by their leaders in doing the important work. And I think that is critical.
Thank you. One by one. Yeah, Carolina, please.
Leadership on such an issue is all about, first, measuring, because if it's not measured, it will not get done. And then commit yourself to a target, and then deliver on that target. Thank you.
Reiko, please.
Yes. Have a vision and mission. Do it with courage.
Okay, Amanda, please.
Maybe I'm more into implementation and adding to what Caroline had said. If you don't have the data, you don't have the number, you cannot measure it. So please firstly, do funding for data. Because with data, we can do prompt intervention and very precise and correctly. That's from me, thank you.
Thank you. You give us very hard questions. And all of us, there's no perfect answer. And no perfect, but we got to answer, what you want first. So maybe clear mission, going to be the first, relatively long term. But as a politician, you have to be elected. You have to convince the people and surrounding yourselves. So rather, short term, but politics should be the longer term. So maybe the citizens themselves, ourselves, has to be mature to judge who can be a good leader. So it's maybe a mutual type of assignment, and so that's what we have to think of. But regarding to your first question about education, data issues, information science, actually this, data is something related to the science issues. Science is not some, a segregated area in which only the scholars to tackle. Science as researchers, we are doing work as a research to aim to solve some kind of social issues, including scientists. So nowadays, the role of science as a larger definition and society is a key issue. And the data itself is not, it's not quite scientific. This is quite humanity issues and social science issues, because data itself is biased from the beginning. What kind of data you are collected and accumulated is a key issue. And so AI and big data is a past data in which people behave within the existing framework, existing systems. But we are discussing about how we can change the society for the future or a better future. Then what kind of data themselves cannot say anything. We are the one who judge and decide and prioritize which one is the first, which one is the next. So it's quite tough because there is no perfect solution. But then again, the next thing we like to say is that different kinds of opinions and discussions is how much variable they are. It's not the perfect consensus, but we have to argue from different lands and different positions. I think that's going to be very important. Thank you.
ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much. Now we would like to move on to Q&A. If you have a question, please raise your hand. Also, please state your name and your affiliation before your question. Please raise your hand if you have a question. Then that gentleman at the corner, please.
Good morning. My name is Sidia Uldelhaj. I'm the ambassador of Mauritania here in Tokyo. And I would like to thank you for the presentation and the report and the insights that came out of the report, as well as the recommendations. But I'm extremely worried because I have followed these issues for quite some time. I am an old man, for decades, I must say, and I'm hearing the same things again and again. I mean, some of the issues that you mentioned here and the recommendations in terms of, I'll just take a few, gender-responsive budget, mainstreaming gender into policies and all policies, the participation of women in decision-making and access to finance, property, the non-inclusion of unpaid work into the economic data, for example, GDP and stuff like that. I mean, these are things that we have heard about a very long time ago. There are at least the technical aspects, we know how to do them. But how many countries have done this? The resolution that you mentioned, 2000, 23 years now. How far have we gone into that? I mean, I don't follow these things in details. You know these things better than I do. But I would like to know, we don't seem to be moving forward or progressing, despite the fact that you did mention some figures that say that the gender gap is being closed, etc. But again, I'm worried. What I would like to express is that I'm really worried about how we're treating this issue and how we're approaching it. And I would like to have, of course, your comment on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
2、3個取っておられてよろしいですか。お答えされます。はい。よろしいですか。それではご答えお願いします。はい。
Yes, please.
You think so? Maybe one to one. One by one. Okay. Then.
よろしいですか。すいません。ありがとうございます。
Sorry, thank you very much for your comments. Now, from now onwards, I would like to gather 2 or 3 questions at once and then ask the GEAC members to respond. So anybody else who would like to ask a question? Yes, please.
Thank you very much. First of all, let me applaud the report presented today from the G7 group. And I also particularly applaud, I'm sorry I have to introduce myself. I'm representing Afghanistan, I'm the ambassador of Afghanistan. And I applaud the statement on Afghanistan. The report I briefly went through, though we are all sad that what happened after the fall of the last government in Afghanistan, and you have rightly discussed earlier, also in the conference, what progress we made in the last 20 years. And needless to mention the millions of girls and women in school and universities in Afghanistan. Politically and institutionally, let me give some figures. Afghanistan women represented 27% in the parliament. And the government, they were represented 35%. In schools, of course, more than 10 millions out of 27 million in Afghanistan. So the setback in Afghanistan today, of course, is saddening. And I'm glad you did mention there. But much more needs to be done rather than simply giving a statement. Because at least the voice is there for the Afghan woman. What I would like to suggest here is that we need to address the logic behind the ban. It's not the societal issue. What is the logic behind it is to use religion. I think we have billions, as we all know, people and Muslims living around the world, developed Muslim nations around the world. And there is very good education for girls and women. I would suggest that we rather deal with the issue of religion. Why would religion be used as a logic behind banning? So I suggest that we call upon Muslim scholars, Muslim nations around the world, that they rally their logic as to whether this is really religion that bans or this is politics behind it. Therefore, I think it would be more effective that the report or the follow-up discussion would focus on the reason, the logic behind this ban, and that OIC and other major Islamic organizations to get together and raise the voice that this is not religion, but this is politics behind it, and we have to stop it. Thank you.
ありがとうございました。それではもう一人だけ。
Thank you very much. We will take one more question and then have the GEAC members respond. Please raise your hand if you have a question.
Good afternoon. My name is Baba Sila from Embassy of Guinea. My question is very short today. I just like to have some knowledge from you guys to give it to us today. How we're gonna make, how we're gonna get idea between law and the religion. I know it's a little bit close to what the question is, but how to make the difference between law and religion, or another world, and the culture. Thank you.
ありがとうございました。それでは、
Thank you very much. May I now ask the GEAC members to respond? May I ask the GEAC members to please respond to those questions?
Thank you very much. Maybe I'll start with a couple of questions and then I'll ask other members. I'm happy to start with the end on the religious questions because it's also linked a little bit to the question asked by Afghanistan and also this discouragement of Mauritania because all are, Mauritania, I think it's 98% of Muslim in Mauritania. So it has a little bit of linkages. What I have noticed, for instance, in terms of religion, is two things. Number one is the use of religion as an excuse to reinforce traditional conservatism. You have a society where people are very, very conservative. They want to reinforce their conservatism. They are looking for a strength to reinforce that conservatism, and the shortcut that they find is religion. And they use the religion because people want to respect religion. They use religion to reinforce tradition. But in fact, when you look at religious prescriptions, unfortunately, you don't see any of these things in it. That's number one. Number two, progress in religion is happening. Let me take Islam. You take in mosques, people use Chinese carpets to pray instead of using the skin because the skin is not comfortable, sometimes it smells, etc. They use electronic counter when they are saying Allah Akbar, they use electronic instead of using the chaplet. The people who are supposed to cry and shout in front of the thing to call, now they use speaker. So it means that the Islamic religion is accepting progress, but when it's on the side of men. So the question becomes, when it comes to women, is the religion so open to progress? Because on the other side, we see that there's progress. So the conclusion to me is that we need to revisit how people use religion to reinforce conservatism. The second thing that I want to say is the role of men. Somebody talked about political will. Political will has three things. It's either resources, number two, policy, number three, technical capacity. Most of the governments, you see sometimes resources allocated, you see laws that are in place, and you see capacity. But what happened is the role of men. When, for instance, you have a magistrate, you have a policeman, you have a medical doctor that are supposed to implement government policy when it comes to violence against women, for instance, you see that they use their own conviction instead of using government policy. And so you see a judge that say, the law says 3 months to 10 years for rape, and that judge will always be going 3 months. And because the guy was in prison for 6 months, he gives 3 months, and then the guy's out. Meanwhile, the law says either 3 months to 10 years. So that type of interference of personal conviction in government laws and policies is also what's happening. In Mauritania, but CEDAW is a very critical document for gender equality in the world. Mauritania has reservation on CEDAW. So that is the type of things that we are talking about, that we might know where we want to go, but we are not going there because of some barriers that are put on there. So that's what I would say for that. Thank you.
Worry about whether we're just saying the same thing each year. And I've been on the GEAC Council for 3 years, and I would say that this dashboard I keep referring to is some way at least of accountability. And the other thing is to which perhaps comes to Afghanistan as well, and that was such a moving a message that you gave about how far women had come, and therefore that progress can be overturned. But that sense of what are the forces that bring about change, and I think although it's very important that we look to governments, we are talking amongst the G7, what civil society can do as well. So it's really interesting to me that you talk about perhaps religious leaders coming to the aid, and in the way that we've seen sort of mass movements of women supporting, for instance, the women of Iran. But that sense of that sometimes that there seems to be a sort of moment of change in how we bring that about. And so I think whatever levers that we can use, and I think it's a sort of brilliant idea if we can get religious leaders perhaps to be able to explain what's the truth and where religion is being used to repress women. And I think that comes to the sort of third question as well, you know, that we must understand the good that religion can do and therefore the responsibility of religious leaders.
Yes, I think in terms of progress, it is because it's difficult that we should be resilient. And also looking at history, gender equality is a relative new item. And many things in politics of society cannot be solved in just a few years. When we had the EU directive voted last year, it was after 10 years. 10 years of debate and resistance, and then it was voted. I was the first generation in my family to combine work and family. So I think that we should see in the history of time that actually a lot of progress has been made already, but still there is more to come. And I think there are two things that can actually help. And that's first the power of digital. My own job in banking, digital access to banking is way more easy now for girls and women, for entrepreneurs, thanks to the digital evolutions. And the second is a childbirth. So, you know, we've been discussing a lot. In some countries you have too little, in some you have too much. You cannot solve this without looking and listening and talking with women. And a lot of politics is done on this behalf, not looking into that aspect. And so I think now, in a lot of countries, including Japan, you only have a girl, one girl. And either the company will stop, either you will be enabling the girl to be part of the company, part of the family equally. So lots of discussions now change because of the evolution in demography. Thank you.
There is no doubt that we are not making the kind of progress we should be making. And in fact, we're seeing pushback in ways we've not seen even in international organizations. And a lot of this, if you really study what the biggest obstacle is, it's norms, it's attitudes, it's mindsets, it's biases. How do you change people's behavior so that they can see the reality as it exists without being hindered by these attitudes and biases? But there's no doubt in terms of the rise of authoritarianism, women are a huge target, whether it's de-ratifying conventions against gender-based violence, whether it's targeting women in politics, which is happening at increasing levels. It's a tough time, and it's going to take all of us in our own ways and more significantly in the broader international community to address it. And I think what's happened in Afghanistan is just heartbreaking because, as you said, Mr. Ambassador, there have been 20 years of progress in many, many areas. And what the Taliban have done is come in and basically erase that progress purposefully. There are over 50 edicts today to oppress women, whether it's not going to school or not working or not even using parks to go outside and use public parks. It's a complete erasure of their rights. And the Taliban have justified this because they've hijacked religion. They've hijacked the tenets of Islam, which basically lay out the importance of education. And if you ask the supreme leader in Kandahar about this, he says, basically, it's our way or the highway. I don't know what it's going to take to persuade. There have been a lot of efforts, as you well know, in the neighboring communities, in particular, in the predominantly Muslim communities, to basically address this and raise it in significant ways. There was just a big meeting in the Gulf states on women's rights, which was an historic gathering to say that Islam and women's rights go hand in hand, are not one against the other. So there have been steps taken, but none of them at this point has been effective enough, and I think it's going to come down to what kind of engagement will take place vis-a-vis the Taliban and how united that engagement will be. So no easy answers because of the kind of rulings that are going on today. And I guess one of the critical issues will be whether or not there are going to be divisions among the Taliban. But at this point, it seems that Kandahar trumps Kabul in many ways. And then in terms of religion, culture, These continue to be very critical issues that I think we very much cannot sidestep, but really have to address because the minority constantly is trumping where people really are in their lives. And when it comes to women, no woman may not understand what the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is, but she knows she should not be abused. And she should not be abused in the name of somebody saying it's her religion to abuse her. So we really have to rise up against these things.
Come on.
Yeah, thank you for the word. Building on the excellent remarks that my esteemed colleagues on GEAC have already done, starting with the third and maybe second question, we do believe that every person is born with the equal rights of to grow in our society, regardless of gender and any other variation. And that is for the benefit of not only economic empowerment, but also peace and prosperity for our societies. Religion shall not and will not hinder that. I myself, a representative of the more private sector, and regarding the first questions about targets and if we are progressing or not, I can say that we are progressing. If we look in terms of gender composition of senior management levels in private companies, we are slowly but yet progressing. We are not satisfied with the pace of change, but we are moving in the right direction. But more importantly, change in the private sector is primarily driven by how capital is being deployed. And capital providers, large mutual funds, pension funds, and institutional funds are increasingly putting demands on, for example, ESG factors, including gender equality, on how they allocate their capital. And as long as capital is being deployed responsibly, which is the current debate, we will move in the right direction. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay.
Okay. Thank you for very important questions. I served as the GEAC member for 3 years and also W20. This is the G20 under the one with the engagement group of G20. And sometimes I feel much the same, all these years, have we really improved situations? Because every year we are putting incredible efforts to make these reports. But I think these gender issues are deeply rooted in our society and culture. We cannot change it so quickly. However, we have to be resilient. We have to put our effort. And these dashboards, the digital issues, they make it clear. We are, sometimes it's bad in Afghanistan case, but we are improving. And also this international community, we share our information, our policy, we compare with what's happening in other countries. I think we can learn a lot, and we have to work together. So I think we never give it up, and I try to work harder to make it better future. Just like fair trade or ESG, I think we're changing. So in future, if the company's product is not based on gender equality, we may not buy it. Something may like that, like environment issues. So I'm very optimistic. Thank you.
You'd like to ask more questions? Seems to me there are a question.
Okay. そうしましたら、
Then we would like to continue with our question and answer session. Those of you who have questions, please raise your hand. Yes, please. The person over here. Please bring the microphone.
Thank you. My name is Emi Okada. I'm from UN Women, Japan Liaison Office. The symposium opened with a remark about the nexus approach, which I understand is a an approach that places importance on the intersectionality of gender issues, as well as, I guess, as well as the synergistic, opportunities of these different areas. And I wanted to, know a bit more about, in your discussions, what were the areas where you identified, scope for more synergy, scope for more, scope for a greater impact based upon understanding the different impediments in your respective areas of focus. So that was number one. I think my second question, going off the ambassador of Mauritania, was you mentioned the dashboard as being, one of the sort of innovative things to come out of your discussions. Are there any other sort of innovations or measures that you would propose to strengthen accountability and also lead the way? Lead the way on, many of these issues, which we have heard time and again. In UN Women, we definitely have heard a lot of these measures proposed. But given that you're taking a leadership role, among the G7 nations, what are some of the approaches that you would recommend that are perhaps different from what we've done before, or perhaps take better stock of some of the big obstacles that we've faced up until now? I'd be curious to know more about that. Thank you.
ありがとうございます。それでは最
Thank you very much. Yes, the person at the back.
Hi. Good morning. My name is Ziad. I'm from Iraq Embassy in Tokyo. I would like to thank you all for your insightful presentation. But I would like also to elaborate on what you said, especially regarding women participation in the society. According to what you said, especially norms and mindset of the society, but also there is traditions also play a very important role in include the women in to participate in the society. And more than that, it's economy also playing very important role in creating job opportunities in order to include women in the society. I'm speaking about my society, especially when we witnessed embargo before 2003. We saw that the women's participation in the society was very low, but because of the job opportunities were very slim. But I'm speaking now, because of the situation is better than before, so that's why we see that the women's voices are heard, and the presence of the women are also available in the society. So all these things, it's not a question, it's only elaboration. Thank you very much.
ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much. And this person over there, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is Hiano Take. I'm a Japanese 21-year-old youth activist on youth and child education empowerment and also women empowerment. And I am actually here as a part of Global Partnership for Education. So I'm very thankful that you covered education as four main pillars today. And I'm very thankful for all the people who have worked hard for this. It's making our young woman's life much better for her future, and I would like to keep on working for even more younger generation than myself as well. But with that said, we must realize that the reality here isn't that easy, and as you have mentioned, it's not moving in the pace that it should be. And as a person who works at Global Partnership for Education, I am very happy that basic education is covered here. But as a hat of a youth, I would like to ask a question on lifelong learning as well. And the reason why I'm asking this is because I am a bit scared as a youth perspective that it might be too late just focusing on children's education in the moment that we live in right now. It is said that during the pandemic in Japan, 8,000 more young adolescent women committed suicide due to the pressure It is also said that during the earthquake, more girls tend to lose life than boys because they tend to protect what's something that's around them, including their family and the society. So my question here, with that said, is that what is your perspective on lifelong learning on women as well, so that they can be more incorporated into not only education but into the labor force as well, especially on, as you mentioned, AI and digital, so especially on STEM education. So I hope that is clear. My question is on lifelong learning for women. So if I can ask for your perspective on that. Thank you.
ありがとうございます。もう一人。
Thank you very much. There is one more question that we would like to take, and then we will have the members respond.
I also joined the whole delegation to thank you for the insightful, comprehensive report that you just produced. My name is Boni Msefano. I work for the Embassy of Rwanda here in Tokyo. So I have just a short comment on the level of comment that came out of the audience about the leadership part and also the political will. I think this is something that comes together. It can't be used one or the other. And I use it basically because of my country, Rwanda, where we've seen this come from our leader, the president. But also on the part of policy, you take it beyond just having policies available, but also come up with an idea of putting it in the constitution, where it would say 30% of the quota system will accept women in leadership in different responsibilities. And I'll end my comment by just giving two best practices that have worked in my country. We've come up with an agency which is called the Gender Monitoring Agency that helps to look at all these practical activities that need to be carried out in terms of the policy alone, the data, the women empowerment areas that were mentioned in this report. How do they actually work with this whole transformation of societies? And then the last one is we have what we call the Isangano One-Stop Center that looks at specifically the gender-based violence issue that involves the Ministry of Health, that involves the police, and also that thirdly involves the Ministry of Justice. Because this kind of intervention is very helpful, and it's also an alert to the society. And I thank you again for this kind of presentation. Thank you.
ありがとうございます。それでは、
Thank you very much. May I ask the members of the GEAC to please respond? We are running out of time, so could you be succinct in your response, please, in the interest of time?
Thank you. Just to pick up, first of all, on the question of what we've learned, I guess, and it was a phrase that came from Always Top of the Class Canada, but was what works. And so we did quite a lot on best practice. So it's interesting just hearing about the one-stop, just who was doing well and what we could learn from each other. So I think that was one thing. Just to mention on Iraq, I was really impressed in Dubai to meet Iraqi ministers, female ministers, and that sense of just what representation, the difference it can make. And just a global partner of education who I'd love to give a big shout out to, because it's a brilliant organisation. And I think on the lifelong learning, you're absolutely right. And I think the back to your point that you're from the beginning of that. We may make choices, things may happen in our lives that shouldn't then just determine what happens forever. And I think, that even comes back to Afghanistan. Things can change. And so I think the idea of being able to retrain, I think the idea of being able to, particularly on something like AI, it's that you may miss your chance once, but you need to have another one. And if perhaps our daughters have not chosen a career in AI, they may pick it up later. I'm just learning the piano in my 60s, so I kind of think never too late.
Anyone? Anyone? Yeah. Oh, you want? Oh, okay. Thank you very much. All questions and comments are quite tough. But related to the good practice, I think gender issues is quite necessary to international collaboration because of it. And we can share the good practice, but we can share so-called bad practice or failures as well. we have learned from it. And why it took so long time to achieve gender equality, that's the question. We didn't intend to repeat or copy what we had said before. But at the beginning of organizing this GEAC team, we all didn't want to say exactly the same thing over and over again. But this issue is so complicated in different, from the different, status, different positions. But personally, bottom line is focusing on the newborn children, small girls. I don't want to take their lives without any reasonable, reasons. I want to avoid it. And I like to, all of the children and the girls and the boys, everyone, like to enjoy the good, opportunity to choose for their lives. So I think that was the bottom line. And furthermore, we have the reason why it took so long time. Because so many different stakeholders and, different kinds of, benefit and the cost, it took so long time. This may be the issue of norm and values. Because of that, it took so long time. But we have to catch up. And furthermore, how we can judge, assess the degree of improvement and promotion, this is also quite subjective. There is no one-dimensional criteria, which is good, which is bad. And it's a kind of gray area. That's why we all have to take a risk to choose one option. Or we have to announce, okay, we'd like to do first. Regardless, this is not the perfect solution because the gender issue is so complicated and very basis. But I like to respect all religions, all opportunities, anything, but I don't want any kids, any children to lose their lives or exclude any kind of variable opportunities without any justification. This is my bottom line. And of course, there is a logic. Logic is not also the universal. Different kinds of logics based on the different kind of religions and histories and political situations and everything. But again, lives and the humans and the human rights should be the bottom line to guarantee. Of course, it's not only, regardless, these issues, nobody say no, but this is also very political kind of games you can be play. But, as one, sociologist, this is my dream to agree that point. But then again, in order to catch up, we can't give in, even though the progress is so low. But we can't stop, challenging and doing and taking a risk to, realize some concrete progression in short period of time. Someone said that we have already behind, so we have to catch up.
ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much. Now we would like to end our question and answer session. Based upon the discussion so far, I would like to ask Professor Shirahase to give us a summary of our discussion.
Done my role. Actually, I've already told enough. But I'd like to overview what we have, we report in our product. And again, main theme of GEAC 2023 related to the G7 Hiroshima and gender mainstreaming for an inclusive, peaceful, and just society. So again, I'd like to thank all of our team and every one of them working very hard. I don't think I can be the good leader, but everyone is a leader, and I feel so fortunate to have such great team. And I have to confess, the team of Secretariat is really small, and a lot is here. And Jiro, he couldn't make it today, and Giselle also they couldn't make it today. But they're quite small, but very effective. I very much appreciate, the help as well. And we have a number of people again. But again, the gender mainstreaming for an inclusive, peaceful, just society is a key issue in this area. And the gender inequality is not only a woman's issue, but the one shared by all people worldwide. By tackling gender inequality, we can address a wide range of social, economic, and political programs. I don't think these 4 topics are not exclusive, and it's not only 4 points which can be solved the problem. But we'd like to focus on economic empowerment in order to, make everyone, particularly women or girls, make their own decisions without any restriction. I'd like them to get power, fundamental power to decide by themselves. And education, this is an investment for a human being. This is very important. Unconscious bias has been built from the childhood, unfortunately. So in order to change it, it took a long time. It's not excuse, but this is a long time. This is a fact. But in order to change unconscious bias, we all have to be educated every second. So education can play the key role. And third, peace building. This is very important. We really like to focus on this topic because G7 was held in Hiroshima in Japan. How important it is. We dream of the world without any war. I know that there are different opinions, different histories, and the difference. We have to respect the difference. But peace is a ultimate goal, and guarantee the human security is also the ultimate tool to realize our peaceful, inclusive society. Then finally, data. In order to judge how bad we are, how behind we are, we need the data. But the data is not easy. Again, how to judge the result of the analysis and how to collect the data. And now is that again, the gender issues are very much closely related to international collaboration because we have the common problems, but at the same time, data is also very much closely related to domestic issues. What kind of social systems you are, how to collect the data, what to determine the unit of the data. So standardized data is really, one of the critical issues working together so that we can analyze it, utilize it to judge the current situation. So that we emphasize it, but then again, I have to say that 2022 German team created the dashboard, and we follow it, with the help of OECD. We are very fortunate. We really, all of us, like to continue or update the dashboard or better, data dashboard for the future. So I will not repeat our recommendations, but please look at the facts and figures. You can see how much we have to make extra effort to close to gender equality. For instance, barely 2% of venture capital goes to women-led startup globally. So this is a really serious figures. And for instance, in 2016 to 18 data, women represented only 35% of higher education graduate in STEM field. And peace building, in analysis of more than 2,000 peace agreements signed between 1990 to 2023, only 21% contain references to women, girls, and gender. And finally, data. Only 20% of the data needed to measure gender environment related to SDGs are available. SDGs emphasize environmental issues, but these environmental issues is hard to measure. How we collect the data across the border, this is our challenging issues as well. So the dashboard, we added two figures of the dashboard. One is a net child care cost for parents using child care facilities. But again, how to define the child care facilities, how to collect the data in various country by country. But this is kind of a snapshot, but still, it's quite variable issues. And the last share of women among all tertiary graduates in STEM, we have quite underrepresentation of women. Of course, pursuing STEM is not the only one solution. And furthermore, you can choose a STEM field and then pursue your philosophy in your graduate work. It's also very good choice as well. So there is no clear cut between art and science. But some of the areas is pretty much underrepresentation of women or girls. So finally, I'd like to acknowledge many people, and even though I said the very small team. So again, I'm very much fortunate as the chair of this team. We all showed our appreciation to complete our mission. We determine keep working, maybe together, and I don't think our team will be resolved. We will keep this team. Thank you very much.
Shirahase sensei.
Thank you very much, Chair Shirahase. Now we would like to invite Marwala Tilizi, Director of the United Nations University and Under-Secretary General of the United Nations.
No, thank you very much. Konnichiwa. Some of you were wondering how I knew I was being called to the front, even though I did not have any earpiece. Maybe this is an indication that I can now understand a bit of Japanese. So, my name is Tshilidzi Marwala. I am the rector of the United Nations University. I'm actually from Johannesburg. And the issues of gender inclusivity is very important to me. I remember when I was a young man, I must have been about 9 years old, and we were in class. And this old man, who happened to be the father of one of my classmates, actually walked into the classroom to take out his daughter out of school. And the reason why he took out his daughter was because he did not believe young girls must come to school. Of course, given my white hair that you can witness, that is many, many years ago. The sad truth is that that incident that happened so many years ago in my own personal life actually still happens today. Almost 45 years later. I don't think we can afford for us to continue like this. Women and girls represent half of the world's population. And therefore half of the world's potential. And that is why gender equality is more than just a fundamental human right. It is also essential for creating peaceful societies that can unlock our full human potential and sustainable development. The world is acutely aware of the detrimental impact of marginalizing half of our population. The former executive director of UN Women, Phumzile Mlambo Ngcuka, once said, "There is no greater force for change, for peace, for justice and democracy, for inclusive economic growth than a world of empowered women." These words ring truer than ever as we reflect on the outcome of this symposium on the GEAC report. And I would like to congratulate Professor Shirahase Sensei, who also happens to be my deputy. She's the senior vice rector of the United Nations University, and also the team for the fantastic work that you have done. It is not the complete story, because the complete story is huge, and it requires all our attention, and it requires us to work hard to ensure that we deal with issues of gender equality. But the GEAC report on titled Towards Gender Equality and Women Empowerment is an important instrument for us to ensure that the story that I related to you when I was 9 years old does not repeat itself time and time again, that we bring such stories to a complete end. The 4 pillars advocated by GEAC report are absolutely spot on. The issues of economic empowerment cannot be emphasized enough. We just have to go to Silicon Valley and see the representation of women there. We just have to go to our stock exchanges and see how many CEOs across the world are actually women. We just have to go to economic studies that show that because of the exclusion of women, many important issues such as economic prosperity, such as the persistent divides, including the divide between the global south and the global north, actually persist because we have not included women into leadership the way we are supposed to. And the issue of education. Education is a human right. And the violation of that right to women, and for any reason, and some of the reasons are religious, some of the reasons are cultural, some of the reasons are we need to end this scourge and ensure that not only, and in many parts of the world, certainly where I come from, you have more women who are graduating from universities than men. But as Professor Shirahase has indicated, there are still some challenges, especially in STEM subjects. And we need to change that picture, even in those countries where more women are graduating from university than men. And in fact, I always say this to the Minister of Education in South Africa, that the overall statistics actually hide, the issues that we need to deal with. How does that translate into the representation at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, for example, in terms of leadership? How does it translate into the number of CEOs who are actually women? And of course, the topic on peace building is actually quite personal for me. I come from a continent where the concept of silencing the guns is still an unrealized dream. I come from a continent where women actually bear the biggest brunt of the conflicts that we see across the continent. And I always say this, that it is human agency that is going to take us out of that. And I think the topic of data is very important. I did a PhD in artificial intelligence many, many years ago. And what we are finding now is that these algorithms that are being trained as recommender systems for decision-making in banks are actually perpetuating the biases that existed before. And as a South African, when you see these biases, the first thing you think about is to organize a protest march and with all sorts of placards. How do you organize a protest march against an algorithm? I think the only way in which we can correct this issue is to ensure that where these algorithms are being developed, that is as representative as possible. It has as many women as possible to ensure that this gender discrimination and gender biases are actually not propagated into the digital space. And of course, as the United Nations, we are working on the Global Digital Compact. And the Global Digital Compact must address once for all this discrimination that is emanating from machines. But these are machines that are created by human beings. And therefore, we need to get the right representation into that spaces. And I think these 4 elements that you have actually worked on will actually be quite critical in advancing gender equality and women empowerment. Where I come from, there is a statement. There is nothing about us without us. I think, and I'm quite confident, there is nothing about women empowerment without women. So I am quite happy to see that the leadership that has been exercised by Professor Shirahase, remarkable, which should serve as a motivation to all of us, whether male or female, as to what ideas and reports are good, but how they are going to be implemented is even more important, and I am quite confident that we are going to see many, many good things coming out of this. Indeed, there is intersectionality that weaves these pillars together. Each pillar is intricately linked to the next, and we cannot view them in silos. As we increasingly grapple with a fragmented world, bridging these gaps that have been identified holds immense value. It is clear that there is a great deal of economic value and human flourishing that can be unlocked through gender equality and empowerment. However, much more needs to be done in order to realize these goals. Recent reports have suggested that in some parts of the world, women's economic participation has regressed rather than recovered. Despite the many grave issues that face the world today, we must not lose sight of the importance that it begins with us. It begins with how we act as individuals. It begins with us, how we interact in our community. And of course, this symposium has been a crucial step in that direction. The UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, has stated that achieving gender equality and empowering women and girls is an unfinished business of our time and the greatest human rights challenge in the world. I have no doubt that we will be emboldened by the contribution made today to rise to that challenge, and a more equal and empowered future is within our reach. I congratulate GEAC for this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rector Maruwara. We would like to continue our discussion, but we are nearing the end of our symposium. I would like to ask Ambassador Saiki Naoko, Ambassador in charge of Women's Issue, to give concluding remarks. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. My name is Saiki Naoko. I'm Ambassador in charge of Women's Issue with the Foreign Ministry. I would like to thank all of you for joining us at the G7 Hiroshima Summit follow-up event, the Symposium on GEAC Report 2023. Thank you very much for attending. This year, Japan has been in the presidency of the G7, and the Foreign Ministry has been working for the meeting of the ministers in charge of gender equality, as well as the women's empowerment. We have been working with the Cabinet Office in charge of monitoring and accountability. We have been leading the way for formulation of G7 Hiroshima Leaders Communique, and we have compiled the D7, the fact sheet of promoting gender mainstreaming through the Nexus approach. We have been also working for another important mission, for which Prime Minister Kishida has convened the activities of GEAC. We have been supporting as a secretariat. GEAC has been launched under the Canadian presidency of G7 in 2018. Although it was suspended at one time, it was revived under the United Kingdom presidency 2021, and monitoring and accountability for the gender sector. The recommendations have been put forward. The GEAC has made a great contribution for the gender mainstreaming in the G7 process. In this year's the GEAC, the members of the GEAC have been with passion and strong sense of mission, although they have been very busy in their own the work, which is working in the front line for your own areas of specialty. You have been working hard to contribute to the GEAC activities. I would like to thank all of you of that you have compiled the final report, which is a wonderful one, as a outcome of the debate you have been engaged in for 6 months, following the recommendation summary which was put forward in May. I would like to thank the chair, Ms. Shirahase, as well as all the members who have diverse backgrounds and the knowledge that you have been able to refine your discussion into a comprehensive and concrete recommendations. I would like to thank all of you. At the G7 Hiroshima Summit, the G7 leaders have welcomed the activities of GEAC and have put forward expectation for further strengthening of your work. For the gender equality and women's empowerment, going through the study of the G7, the working group, the GEAC activities will be continued, and to be ensured its diversity, I very much hope that from next year onwards, the G7 process will also continue to make great contribution. Once again, I would like to thank all of you for the great contribution. Thank you.
This concludes the Symposium on GEAC Report 2023 G7 Hiroshima Summit follow-up event towards gender equality and women's empowerment. Thank you very much, everyone.
お帰りの際には
please leave the simultaneous interpretation receiver on your desk, and please make sure that you do not bring it back. Thank you.